Good to see you.
Yo, Esky boy in the building.
So good afternoon and welcome, Elon. Oh, I was going to take off my tie. Is that all right if I do that?
I came in with a tie, but then I was like told there should be a tie, so.
Then we'll both be more comfortable.
That was good. Well, thanks for having me.
Appreciate your being here today. It's when I'm with you, it's difficult to know where to start. Let's start just what drives you? What is it that when you wake up in the morning, do you see a problem and you want to solve it?
I think the thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. That we're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible, to be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. So that's what really drives me is trying to figure out how to make sure that things are great and going to be so, and that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX. Is that I think it's pretty important that we accelerate the transition to sustainable generation and consumption of energy. It's inevitable, but it matters if it happens sooner or later. And then SpaceX is about helping make life multiplanetary and doing what we can to continue the dream of Apollo and ultimately make a contribution to life becoming multiplanetary.
Let's talk a little more about that. I think everyone's very interested in that when you say making life multiplanetary.
Yeah. That's exciting.
It is exciting. So what's your vision there?
I think, particularly for Americans, think about America is a nation of explorers. People came here from other parts of the world that, chose to give up the known in favor of the unknown. So I think exploration, I think the United States is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. So that's why it appeals to Americans so much. You can see this when, say, there was a shuttle tragedy and 7 people died, and that's terrible, but a lot of people die all the time. But why do we care so much? Because it was the dream of exploration that was dying along with those people. That's why.
No, and I'm one of those, and probably like many of you, remember exactly where you were when that tragedy happened. So you have 30 plus governors here today, and we're very excited about your willingness to be with us. And you hopefully heard me talk a little bit about my initiative, which is being ahead of the curve. What do you tell us as governors? What should we be thinking about in terms of innovation and developing public policy for the future?
Well, it sure is important to get the rules right. It's sort of, in terms of legislative and executive actions, it's sort of like, think of, say, like professional sports or something. If you don't have the rules right, if there isn't, if the game isn't set up properly, it's not going to be a good game. So it's real important to get the rules right. Now, I think it's worth noting that I think still in the United States the rules are still better than anywhere else. It's very easy to put something in place which is an inhibitor to innovation without realizing it. So in terms of the regulatory environment, it's always important to bear in mind that regulations are immortal. And they never die unless somebody actually goes and kills them, and then they get a lot of momentum. So a lot of times regulations can be put in place for all the right reasons, but then nobody goes back and gets rid of them afterwards when they no longer make sense. And there used to be a rule in the early days when people were concerned about automobiles, because that was a pretty scary thing to see a carriage just going wrong by itself. Mm-hmm. You never know what those things might do. So there were like rules where you had to, in a lot of states, where you had to carry a lantern in front of the automobile. And it had to be like 100 paces ahead of the automobile. There had to be someone with a lantern on a pole. Like, okay. But you should really get rid of that regulation. And they did, because it would really be awkward. So just regulations, even if done correctly and being right at the time, it's always important to go back and scrub those, periodically to make sure they're still sensible, they're still serving the greater good. I think in terms of tax structure, what is economically incented and what is not economically incented, just make sure that the incentive structure is correct. I think I'm saying just totally common sense things here. But it's economics 101. Whatever you incent will happen. So if you incent one thing, that thing will tend to happen more than the other thing. If you incent another thing, that thing will happen. And so the economics should favor innovation. And this is particularly important to protect small to medium-sized companies, because it's sort of like trying to grow a tree in a forest. Like, it's real hard for a new company to grow. When it's just a seedling or a sapling, it needs a lot more protection than if it's a giant redwood or something like that. So very important to give support to small to medium-sized companies on the innovation front. Because they're the ones that need it more than the big companies. And I think at this point Tesla's almost a biggish company anyway. So I'd favor, supporting smaller companies than Tesla, relatively speaking.
What would your response be? Because there are critics out there with regard to incentives, mm-hmm. and that, sure. And Tesla has been, and I can speak from experience, the beneficiary of incentives, economic mm-hmm. incentives, with regard to the Gigafactory.
Sure.
What would you tell those people?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, as you know, those incentives were a little overstated. In the case of the Gigafactory, it's a $5 billion capital investment to get that factory going. And I didn't actually know this until, by the way, I didn't know this until we did the press conference. Actually, that over 20 years, the Nevada incentives added up to $1.3 billion. I actually didn't even know this. But it's,
now he's telling me. Go ahead.
Literally, I learned it at the press conference. I'm like, really? No, but I mean, it's the thing is that they took what added up over 20 years and made it sound like Nevada was writing us a $1.3 billion check, and I'm still waiting for that check. Did it get lost in the mail? I don't know. But this is the way the press works, of course. If you divide 1.3 billion by 20, okay, then it's like, okay, Tesla's on average receives sort of a tax. It's basically sales and use tax abatement is what it amounts to. So Tesla gets we get on the order of 50 to 60 million of sales and use tax abatement divided over 20 years. But this is for something which has a $5 billion capital cost just to get going, and then would have to generate about $100 billion over that period of time to achieve a $1.3 billion tax benefit. So essentially, it's a little over 1% over that period of time, and that's great, okay? But it's not, it's not like it's not the way it was characterized in the press. Because if it's put in the proper context, it sounds like, okay, well, that's neat, it's about 5% helpful on setting up the factory and about 1% helpful over the next 20 years. Cool. That actually sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
So that was helpful, but there are a lot of other factors as well. We actually had slightly bigger incentive packages from some other states that were offered, but we factored in how quickly could we get the Gigafactory into operation, what were the risks associated with that progress, what would be the logistics costs over time of transferring battery packs and powertrains to a vehicle factory in California. And all of those factors weighed together is what led us to make the decision in favor of Nevada. And working with your team was great. It was very forward-leaning, and a big part was also just like making sure you feel really welcome, within a state. That's sort of what led us to make the decision for the Gigafactory. And then we have another factory in New York doing solar panels. Will be the biggest solar panel producer in North America when it's done. And then we expect to establish probably at least 2 or 3 more Gigafactories in the US in the next several years. As well as a couple overseas. But the overall objective of Tesla is really what set of actions can we take to accelerate the advent of sustainable production and consumption of energy. I think the sort of the way I would assess the historic good of Tesla is in terms of how many years of acceleration was it. And if we can accelerate sustainable energy by 10 years, I would consider that to be a great success. Even if it was only 5 years, that would still be pretty good. That's the overarching optimization.
So you've talked about interplanetary travel and sustainable energy and the vehicles a little bit. What would you want things to look like in 5 to 10 years associated with energy? Sure. And with autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles?
Well, I think things are going to grow exponentially. So there's a big difference between 5 and 10 years. My guess is, probably in 10 years, more than a half of new vehicle production is electric in the United States. And China's probably going to be ahead of that because China's been super pro-EV. I don't think a lot of people know this, but China's environmental policies are way ahead of the U.S. Their mandate for renewable energy far exceeds the U.S. I think sometimes people are under the impression that China is either dragging their feet or somehow behind the U.S. in terms of sustainable energy promotion, but they're by far the most aggressive on Earth. It's crazy. In fact, a coalition of Chinese car manufacturers just wrote the Chinese government to beg for them to slow down the mandate because it's too much. They need to make 8% electric vehicles, I think, next year or in 2 years or something. They can't physically do it. So China's by far the most aggressive on electric vehicles and solar. But that's a common misperception that they're not. There's one Google search way to figure this out, by the way. It's really pretty easy. So, and in 10 years, man, I think, so half of all production, I think, will be EV. I think almost all cars produced will be autonomous in 10 years. Almost all. it will be rare to find one that is not in 10 years. That's going to be a huge transformation. Now, the thing to bear in mind, though, is that new vehicle production is only about 5% the size of the vehicle fleet. So you think about how long does a car or truck last? And they last 15 to 20 years, so before they're finally scrapped. So new vehicle production is only roughly at most 1/15 of the fleet size. So even when new vehicle production, say, switches over to electric or to autonomous, that still means the vast majority of the fleet on the roads is not. It'll take another, 5 to 10 years before that becomes the majority of the fleet becomes EV or autonomous. But if you were to say go out 20 years, overwhelmingly things are electric, autonomous, overwhelmingly.
Fully autonomous?
Fully autonomous.
So no one will have to touch the steering wheel if there is one?
There will not be a steering wheel. In 20 years, it will be like having a horse. People have horses, which is cool. But
So having a regular car will be like having a horse. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah. And there will be people that have non-autonomous cars, like people have horses. It just would be unusual to use that as a mode of transport.
Yes, all right. Now, let's talk about the energy piece and rooftop solar and storage.
First of all, it's important to appreciate that the Earth is almost entirely solar-powered today, in the sense that the sun is the only thing that keeps us from being at roughly the temperature of cosmic background radiation, which is 3 degrees above absolute zero. If it wasn't for a sun, we'd be a frozen dark ice ball. And the amount of energy that hits the sun, that reaches us from the sun, is tremendous. It's 99% plus of all energy that Earth has. Then there's this energy we need to use to run civilization, which to us is big, but compared to the amount of energy that reaches us from the sun is tiny. So it's very easy. It actually doesn't take much. If you wanted to power the entire United States with solar panels, it would take a fairly small corner of Nevada, Texas, Utah, anywhere. You only need about 100 miles by 100 miles of solar panels to power the entire United States. And then the batteries you need to store that energy to make sure you have 24/7 power is 1 mile by 1 mile. So one square mile. That's it. I showed the graph of or image of this where this is what 100 miles by 100 miles looks like. It's like a little square on the U.S. map. And then there's a little pixel inside there, and that's the size of the battery pack that you need to support that. Real tiny.
So, Will, you talked about 20 years from now, none of us, well, some people will still be using horses or
It won't be zero.
Yeah, but
It's so rare.
So what will the energy piece look like? I mean, what will there be? Transmission lines? Will there be a need?
Yeah, I think the use of energy is roughly divided into 3 areas. And they're more or less equal at a high level. There's about a third of energy is used for transportation of various kinds. About a third is used for electricity. About a third is used for heating. So if you want to have, and then of the electricity production, call it, something on the order of 10%, depending upon how you count it, is renewable. Maybe 15% today. So that means that there's a massive amount of solar that would need to be produced and connected in order to be fully sustainable. Because fully sustainable means you're tackling transport, non-renewable electricity generation and heating. So that means that we'll need to be a combination of utility scale solar and rooftop scale solar combined with wind, geothermal, hydro, probably some nuclear for a while, in order to transition to a sustainable situation, which means really for the most part massive growth in solar. And it's going to be important to have rooftop solar in neighborhoods because otherwise there'll need to be massive new transmission lines built. And people do not like having transmission lines go through the neighborhood. They really don't like that. And I agree. So you want to have some localized energy production combined with utility. So you want rooftop solar, utility solar, and that's really going to be the solution from a physics standpoint. That I can't see any other way to really do it. People talk a lot about fusion and all that, but the sun is a giant fusion reactor in the sky, and it's really reliable. It comes up every day. So if it doesn't, we've got bigger problems.
Somebody asked me to ask you this. We talked about workforce today, but they asked me, are robots going to take our jobs, everybody's jobs in the future? Or how much do you see artificial intelligence coming into the workplace?
Well, first of all, I think on the artificial intelligence front, I have exposure to the very most cutting edge AI. And I think people should be really concerned about it. I keep sounding the alarm bell, but until people see like robots going down the street killing people, like they don't know how to react, because it seems so ethereal. I think we should be really concerned about AI, and I think we should. AI is a rare case where I think we need to be proactive in regulation instead of reactive. Because I think by the time we are reactive in AI regulation, it's too late. And normally the way regulations are set up is that a whole bunch of bad things happen, there's a public outcry, and then after many years, a regulatory agency is set up to regulate that industry. And there's a bunch of opposition from companies who don't like being told what to do by regulators. Anyway, it takes forever. That in the past has been bad, but not something which represented a fundamental risk to the existence of civilization. AI is a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization. In a way that car accidents, airplane crashes, faulty drugs, or bad food were not. They were harmful to a set of individuals within society, of course, but they were not harmful to society as a whole. AI is a fundamental existential risk for human civilization, and I don't think people fully appreciate that. It's not fun being regulated. It's not, it can be pretty irksome, but in the car business, we get regulated by Department of Transport, by EPA, and a bunch of others, and there's regulatory agencies in every country. In space, we get regulated by FAA, but if you ask the average person, hey, do you want to get rid of the FAA and just like take a chance on manufacturers not cutting corners on the aircraft because profits were down that quarter? I was like, hell no. That sounds terrible. So I think even people who are pretty extremely like libertarian free market, they'd be like, yeah, we should probably have somebody keeping an eye on the aircraft companies, making sure they build a good aircraft and good cars and that kind of thing. So I think there's a role for regulators. That's very important. And I'm against overregulation for sure. But man, I think we better get on that with AI pronto. So there'll certainly be a lot of job disruption. Because what's going to happen is robots will be able to do everything better than us. I'm including, I mean, all of us, you know. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to do about this. This is really like the scariest problem to me, I'll tell you. Yeah, so I really think we need government regulation here, just because this is, you know, ensuring the public good is served. Because you've got companies that are racing, they kind of have to race to build AI, or they're going to be made uncompetitive. You know, like essentially, if your competitor is racing to build AI and you don't, they will crush you. So then you're like, we don't want to be crushed. So, you know, I guess we need to build it too. That's where you need the regulators to come in and say, hey guys, you all need to really, you know, just pause and make sure this is safe. And like when it's cool and and the regulators are convinced that it's safe to proceed, then you can go. But otherwise, slow down. But you kind of need the regulators to do that for all the teams in the game. You know, otherwise the shareholders will be saying like, hey, why aren't you developing AI faster? Because your competitor is. I'm like, okay, we've got to do that. Anyway, so it's like, I mean, there's like something like 12% of jobs are transport. Transport will be one of the first things to go fully autonomous. But when I say everything, like the robots will be able to do everything, bar nothing.
Let's move back to you're rolling out the Model 3 this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how many orders? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, it's going well on that front. We got, I don't know, more. I think like if somebody orders a Model 3 today, they'd only get it probably late next year. We just started production. Made the first production unit last week. The thing that is not well appreciated about something about cars and any kind of new technology is how hard it is to do the manufacturing. It is vastly harder to do the manufacturing by a factor of 100, like 100, than to make one of something. With maybe 50 or 60 people, we could make a prototype of practically anything in 6 months. Now to manufacture that thing, we need 5,000 people to spend, 3 years, and that's considered really fast. So manufacturing does this kind of S-curve where it's excruciatingly slow at first, and then it grows exponentially, but people tend to extrapolate on a straight line. So if it's real slow at first, they say, oh, this is real slow, look at that. They're only going to make 5 cars a week forever. Like, nope. It'll be 10 cars a week, then 20 cars a week, then 40 cars a week, then 5,000 cars a week eventually. It just grows crazy fast. So we're hoping to get to something like 5,000 cars a week by the end of the year.
Well, I wanted to give an opportunity for some of the governors to ask questions and perhaps some audience questions. I was told that you'd be willing to do
absolutely.
that.
Great.
So, governors, any questions for Elon? Governor Scott.
Well, thank you very much. We in Vermont have partnered with Tesla in terms of a power pack in our homes, and it's for $15 a day. You can rent this for 15 years, and it'll carry power as a backup generation device for 12 hours, and it's been really, really interesting from my perspective. But I'm curious about vehicles and where we're going in the future, or how far in the future do the cars themselves become the charging device, like the roof and deck lids and hood, or do the batteries get so efficient that you don't need that, and then you just power up for a week or something like that? Where are we going in the future with battery storage?